Welcome back to our study on the book of Revelation. Tonight we're actually going to be in the book of Daniel, and I know this is a study on Revelation, but there are two chapters in Daniel that I think are absolutely vital to understanding the book of Revelation. So we have to study them. So the first one is Daniel chapter 7, and the other one is Daniel chapter 9. And there are so many really interesting and really pivotal and important prophecies in the book of Daniel, especially the last 6 chapters of Daniel. And we're not going to cover them all, but we can't cover the book of Revelation really well without looking at chapter 7 and chapter 9. So if you'll turn with me tonight to Daniel chapter 7, we're just going to be in Daniel chapter 7, and then next week we will look at chapter 9 and also part of chapter 12. All right, so book of Daniel. You guys know the character of Daniel. My personal favorite character from the Bible. He's one of the few characters that you can look at and you don't see sin. Like, I know Daniel was a sinner, but the Bible doesn't really present him in any light that you think, oh, that was clearly a sin. He's just a man of integrity, a man of God, and he was very special to God. God makes a note of this several times and actually sends the archangels to go and speak to Daniel and tells him from God that he is special in God's eyes. And I think that is one of the reasons why, of all the prophets, no one was giving a more detailed and more important prophecies than Daniel. Not until you see John, the beloved disciple, do you see prophecies of this much weight and merit and importance to the big picture of the plan of God for the world. But chapter 7 is one of those that are just mind-blowing, and it reveals some things that are tied directly to the chapters that we are studying in Revelation. So let's look at these now, starting with verse 1. Earlier, during the first year of King Belshazzar's reign in Babylon, Daniel had a dream and saw visions as he lay in his bed. He wrote down the dream, and this is what he saw. In my vision that night, I, Daniel, saw a great storm churning the surface of a great sea, with strong winds blowing from every direction. Then 4 huge beasts came up out of the water, each different from the others. The first beast was like a lion with eagle's wings. As I watched, its wings were pulled off, and it was left standing with its 2 hind feet on the ground, like a human being, and it was given a human mind. All right, I'm going to stop there. And some of you already know what these beasts represent, and Daniel it gets the explanation from an angel later on, but I want to kind of detail it as we go along so you're not confused until the second half of this chapter. But one thing I want to note is, I think it's fascinating that these beasts come out of the sea, and Jewish culture and their whole oral tradition and all that kind of stuff, they had this idea that Jewish people were often represented as coming out of the ground, Adam and Eve out of the ground, and that kind of stuff. And so when they use that kind of imagery out of the ground, it's people of God. And when it comes out of the sea was scary to the Israelite people. It was the unknown. It was, if something was coming out of the sea, it was not a good thing. And you'll see this also in Revelation, and I'll point this out later as we go along. But things that come out of the sea are usually not good things. And so they usually represented Gentile things not of the Jewish people. And so here you have what is going to be 4 empires that are coming out of the Gentile nations they're evil and anti-Israel. All right? And so the first one is this lion with eagle's wings. And it represents the nation of Babylon. It is the nation that Daniel is currently serving in. He's living in that majestic empire with this lion and with eagle's wings. And you could actually, there are carvings and imagery from the ancient city of Babylon that have a lion with eagle's wings. You can actually see this in British museums. And the reason for this particular imagery for Babylon is because King Nebuchadnezzar was a majestic king. He had this incredible authority, and he ruled with this power and regality, I would say. All right, but then let's keep reading though, because we want to see the next one. Oh, and I also think it's interesting too that it specifically mentions, and it was given a human mind. I think that's interesting because Nebuchadnezzar loses his mind and he turns into a beast for a while because he got too proud and got arrogant and thought it was all about him, and God put him in his place. And basically, he showed Nebuchadnezzar enough grace to show him the error of his ways and convince Nebuchadnezzar to, at least for a time, to believe in the one true God. And so this whole idea of giving him a human mind is definitely referring to the empire that Nebuchadnezzar built of Babylon. All right, verse 5. Then I saw a second beast, and it looked like a bear. It was rearing up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And I heard a voice saying to it, "Get up, devour the flesh of many people." All right, and if you look at point number 2, the bear with the 3 ribs in its mouth represents the Medo-Persian Empire. The bear with the 3 ribs in its mouth represents the Medo-Persian Empire. And no word is wasted in Scripture. Here you have this image of this huge lumbering bear. Ferocious, of course. I mean, you do not want to come face to face with a bear. One swipe of its paw would kill you. All right. But how it describes it is rearing up on one side. Why is it rearing up on one side? It's because in the Medo-Persian Empire, the Persian side of that empire was much more powerful, much stronger. And so one side was a little bit weaker than this other side that was more of the raging side. The Persian Empire brought more people to it, and also its rulers were more powerful. It kind of assimilated the Mede Empire. All right, and so then it has 3 ribs in its mouth. Why 3 ribs in its mouth? Most commentators believe that this is representative of the 3 nations that they ate, kind of devoured, and that would be Egypt, Libya, and then of course Babylon, because this is the nation that's going to come up, the empire that's going to replace the Babylonian Empire and conquer the Babylonian Empire. I also believe it's represented by a bear, because while Nebuchadnezzar got to power like really with the force of his authority and the way they did it, the Mede-Persian Empire did it with numbers. I mean, they didn't do it fast or quick or anything. They were this big, huge, lumbering army, but the numbers were insurmountable. You couldn't defeat it. And so, and they were a very vicious people. And so I think that's why it's represented by this bear that's devouring many people. All right, verse 6. Then the third of these strange beasts appeared, and it looked like a leopard. It had 4 birds' wings on its back, and it had 4 heads. Great authority was given to this beast. All right, and this beast represents the Greek Empire. And the reason why it's a leopard, leopards are extremely fast, and they're sleek, and that is the perfect description of the Greek Empire and how it came into power. Alexander the Great, which is the famous ruler that put the Greeks into power as a world power, he conquered the entire known world at that time, all the way, the entirety of Asia, all the way to stretches of Europe, that huge stretch of land, in 12 years. Conquered the world, the known world, in 12 years. Unbelievable. The speed. He never lost a battle. Conquest. He never lost a conquest, went from place to place and place, and rapidly took out every nation that tried to stand against him. It's just remarkable what he did in such a short period of time. And he died at a very young age, but because he conquered it so rapidly, he was able to conquer the known world. So that's why leopard. Why 4 wings? Why 4 heads? Well, when he died, like I mentioned, he died at a very young age, in his early 30s. His empire was broken up and given to 4 leaders at that time, and they ruled the known world, 4 different sections of it, so to speak. All right, so everything has a purpose. Everything's tied to something. All right, then we have this strange 4th beast in verse 7. Then in my vision that night, I saw a 4th beast, terrifying, dreadful, and very strong. It devoured and crushed its victims with huge iron teeth and trampled their remains beneath its feet. It was different from any of the other beasts, and it had 10 horns. As I was looking at the horns, suddenly another small horn appeared among them. 3 of the first horns were torn out by the roots to make room for it. This little horn had eyes like human eyes and a mouth that was boasting arrogantly. I watched as the thrones were put in place, and the Ancient One sat down to judge. His clothing was as white as snow, his hair like purest wool. He sat on a fiery throne with wheels of blazing fire, and a river fire was pouring out, flowing from his presence. Millions of angels ministered to him. Many millions stood to attend him. Then the court began its session, and the books were opened. I continued to watch because I could hear the little horn's boastful speech. I kept watching until the fourth beast was killed and its body was destroyed by fire. The other three beasts had their authority taken away from them, but they were allowed to live a while longer. All right, a lot here. Okay, and so Daniel sees this fourth beast. And we know from other parts of Daniel, and if you've done any study on Daniel, we know that this is a prophecy about the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is the fourth beast. But what is unusual is it seems to go way beyond just describing the Roman Empire. There are things in here that don't fit with the beginning and fall of the Roman Empire. First of all, I think it's important to note that he doesn't assign an animal to this particular beast. It's unlike anything he's ever seen. And I think because it encapsulates a long time period, and that this is the ruling empire, that is where the Antichrist is going to come from, and Satan's going to make his final stand, and all these different things, which I'll explain in a little bit. I think this creature was just indescribable to Daniel. It wasn't like anything he'd ever seen. And yes, it's going to come and devour and crush its victims. It's going to be bigger than any empire that's ever ruled before it. But then it starts talking about these horns. And horns represent power. Horns represent authority. And there's these 10 horns. And then there's this small little horn that appears after 3 horns have been plucked out. It's like, what is it talking about? What is going on here? And I know this is very difficult to understand, but I'm going to tell you what most commentators believe and what I believe about this. They believe that while it is also talking about the Roman Empire, this is actually the primary reason why people believe that the Antichrist will somehow come out of the former Roman Empire. You know, for a long time, scholars believed that the Pope was the Antichrist. I don't know how many very godly men, and I think they're completely wrong, claim that so-and-so Pope and so-and-so Pope, or a Pope one day would become the Antichrist, because they had to think it's so clearly this is the end. This is talking about the Antichrist. A little horn is the Antichrist, and it's coming out of the fourth power, so somehow it has to be still tied to the Roman Empire. And of course, the Catholic Church was, referred to the Holy Roman Empire, and all these kind of different things were tied together. They thought, well, that's a remnant of the Roman Empire, is the Catholic Church, and it has a lot of influence. Well, maybe that's where the Antichrist is coming from. All right, I don't know, maybe, but it seems unlikely to me. Certainly none of the popes in the past have been Antichrist, because they haven't fulfilled that role, all the things that we were told about the Antichrist through Scripture. All right. Could one day a pope be the Antichrist? I guess, but I see that the Catholic Church has had less and less power over generations, and I would find that hard to believe. But it is convincing to me that the Antichrist will come out of a nation that was at one time part of the Roman Empire. But that leaves you with a lot of nations. And I also think that maybe the one world government that will come and be ruled by the Antichrist will maybe even have its birth in Italy, or at least the parts that the Roman Empire encompassed at some point. I don't think it's coming from America. The Antichrist is not coming from America or China or anything like that. It's somehow coming from Europe, but I'm just assuming. But I'm assuming that because of this passage, that this little horn, which is representative of the Antichrist and is also mentioned in Revelation, it is coming from this fourth empire. Somehow it's still connected. And so please keep in mind that the age of the church means nothing to Daniel. Now, I'm sure he loves the church up in heaven, Daniel, but the age of the church, it was not Daniel's concern when he was writing his prophecies. When he was writing his prophecies, he was speaking to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people were not a nation from the time of Babylon all the way till 1948. And so he is not concerned with all this time, this 2,000 years in between. Right? He is concerned about the coming of the Messiah, and then the end time when the Jews will finally have a nation again and be redeemed. And so we may think it's odd that the Roman Empire is talked about, and then suddenly it's talking about the Antichrist at the end times. But it's not strange to Daniel because in God's eyes, this Roman Empire never goes away completely. There is no other world power that comes and dominates the world like this Roman Empire. And we see that, like, Hitler tried, Britain, conquered a lot, but nothing has been to this kind of reach before. And at some point, now that Israel is back as a nation, this Roman Empire is going to be revitalized in some way, shape, or form, and the Antichrist is going to come from it. All right. And then we have this interesting scene where it shows the throne room, and it shows God and how the angels are ministering to him and all this kind of stuff. And here is this boastful little horn speaking as the Antichrist and talking blasphemy against God. But look at his end. And it says, the fourth beast was killed, and his body was destroyed by fire. And the other three beasts had their authority taken from them, but they were allowed to live a while longer. I know this is a lot to take from just these few verses, but I think this points out a number of different things from Revelation. First of all, if I could go back to the roots being pulled out and the horns, I believe at some point there's going to be a one world government. Now, I'm sure there'll be other governments that don't buy into this one world government, but that's going to have the authority over the earth. And apparently, because there's 10 horns, I believe there's going to be 10 rulers in this one world government, or people that have a place of power. But 3 of them are going to be, I don't know, because of scandal or assassination or just because they're overtaken. But the little horn, the person that is going to become the Antichrist, is somehow going to assume authority and assume more authority than the rest of the people in this one world government. And I believe that he will eventually be the face and the head of it and have absolute control. But I think that's what it's talking about when it has the 3 horns ripped out. Somehow the Antichrist is going to come to more power through removing those 3 leaders. All right? And then in verses 11 and 12, which we just read, when it talks about being destroyed, well, when we're going to look at Revelation, when we get back to Revelation, we will see that the end for the Antichrist and Satan and his prophets and all that is going to be the lake of fire. They're going to be destroyed with fire. And everything that is tied to the Antichrist and his world power is going to be destroyed and no longer allowed to survive. But then it says this weird statement, the other 3 beasts had their authority taken from them, but they were allowed to live a little longer. I believe that there will be no world power, anything tied to the Antichrist and that one world power will be absolutely removed from the face of the earth and not allowed to reign during the millennial reign. But your Greek Empire, your Babylonian Empire, your Mede-Persian Empire, those nations will be allowed to exist. The remnants of those nations will be allowed to exist even during the time of Christ's reign on earth for a time. When heaven and earth is remade and all things made new and the final judgment comes, I don't think it'll be that way. I think it'll all be given a fresh, clean slate. But I think when Jesus reigns for 1,000 years in the millennial reign, apparently there'll be remnants of these other empires that will be allowed to live for a while longer. All right, I know that's a lot. I know we have a lot more to read in this chapter, but let's kind of get to it. All right, verse 13. As my vision continued that night, I saw someone like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. He was given authority, honor, and sovereignty over all the nations of the world, so that people of every race and nation and language would obey him. His rule is eternal. It will never end. His kingdom will never be destroyed. Clearly, this is the Son of God. This is Jesus, all right? The Ancient of Days is God the Father. The Son of Man is Jesus Christ. And he will come, and he will be given authority, honor, and sovereignty over all the nations of the world. Now, you could say that when Jesus died and rose from the dead, he established his spiritual kingdom on the earth, and maybe that's what this is talking about. Possibly, but I don't think so, because we are talking about literal empires that ruled the earth. And I believe that this is talking about the millennial reign. Well, when Jesus comes back the second time, he is going to rule with an iron rod for 1,000 years on earth. All right. And so to me, that's what this is talking about. And it's a prophecy about that time where all the people, every single race, every nation, every language will obey him. And his rule from that point on will be eternal. No one's going to ever usurp his reign. All right. So clearly it's a future time. It's got to be a future time because that hasn't happened yet. All right, verse 15. I, Daniel, was troubled by all I had seen, and my visions terrified me. So I approached one of those standing beside the throne and asked him what it all meant. He explained it to me like this. These 4 huge beasts represent 4 kingdoms that will arise from the earth. But in the end, the holy people of the Most High will be given the kingdom, and they will rule forever and ever. Then I wanted to know the true meaning of the 4th beast, the one so different from the others and so terrifying. It had devoured and crushed its victims with iron teeth and bronze claws, trampling their remains beneath its feet. I also asked about the 10 horns on the 4th beast's head and the little horn that came up afterward and destroyed 3 of the other horns. This horn had seemed greater than the others, and it had human eyes and a mouth that was boasting arrogantly. As I watched, this horn was waging war against God's holy people and was defeating them until the Ancient One, the Most High, came and judged in the favor of his holy people. Then the time arrived for the holy people to take over the kingdom. All right, this is very important because this is again tying to the tribulation to me, in my personal opinion. So the little horn, Antichrist, he's going to do a peace treaty with Israel for 3.5 years. But at the end of that, he is going to break that treaty. He is going to set up, and I'm stealing my thunder from next week, but he's going to set up an object of desolation, abomination of desolation, and just to defy God inside the temple. He's going to do all these things, and he is going to attack the people. He is going to want to wipe them out because, again, he's the puppet of Satan here, and so he's going to want to wipe out God's people, Israel. And so it's going to be a very hard time for Israel. He's going to provide protection for them, but he's not coming back yet. But then at the end of that 3.5 years, he is coming back, and he is going to make things right, and he's going to judge this little horn. All right, so let's keep reading. Verse 23, Then he said to me, This 4th beast is the 4th world power that will rule the earth. It will be different from all the others. It will devour the whole world, trampling and crushing everything in its path. Its 10 horns are 10 kings who will rule that empire. Then another king will arise, different from the other 10, who will subdue 3 of them. He will defy the Most High and oppress the holy people of the Most High. He will try to change their sacred festivals and laws, and they will be placed under his control for a time, times, and half a time. Okay, again, 4th beast, 10 rulers here. Now, some people have tried to place the former Roman Empire into this passage. And they've tried to list a number of different rulers of the Roman Empire and say these were the 10, that's what they were talking about, and now the Antichrist is going to come later. It's possible. I mean, I understand why they reason it that way, but it's also very subjective and arbitrary, like what 10 rulers you choose, because there's definitely more than 10 rulers of the Roman Empire, and which ones do you count, which ones do you not count. I personally believe that when the Roman Empire reestablishes itself, and it might not be called that, I doubt it'll be called that, but when there is a world power that comes up out of the former Roman Empire that literally rules the whole world, every surface of the world, like they have control of the entire world, I believe that they will have a system of government that will have 10 rulers as a part of that. It'll be, that's when I mentioned before, a one world government. But the Antichrist will maybe not be one of those initial 10. He might be, but if he is somehow going to assume more authority by getting rid of 3 of those 10 and kind of assuming more of authority. And I don't think it's beyond reason to think that the way he's able to usurp those 3 possibly is because of the devastation and destruction that happens in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Like, that is going to be a big deal because a lot of armies, a lot of soldiers are going to be killed. So entire nations are going to be completely depleted. So if the men that were on that one world government happen to be part of that situation, I could see how they would lose their power and the Antichrist would have an opportunity to kind of take their place and assume control of that organization. But he is going to lead and he's going to defy the holy people to the point of, like, he will stop them being able to offer sacrifices and worship in the temple and all these different things. And then verse 26, But then the court will pass judgment, and all his power will be taken away and completely destroyed. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be given to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will last forever, and all rulers will serve and obey him. That was the end of the vision. I, Daniel, was terrified by my thoughts, and my face was pale with fear, but I kept these things to myself. More evidence that this is talking about the last 3 years and half a years of tribulation is this reference to, and they will be placed under his control. Okay, so Israel will be placed under his control as the world leader, the Antichrist, for a time, times, and a half time. Now, I know this is very strange, but a time represented symbolically 1 year. And when it is pluralized, times, it's referring to 2 years and a half time. So this is altogether 3.5 years. It's like a poetic way of describing 3.5 years, time, times, and a half time. And at that time, at the end of that 3.5 years, his power will be taken away, completely destroyed. God will establish his 1,000-year reign, and from that point on, all the rulers of the earth. There'll be other rulers. There'll be kings and governors and presidents and all that kind of stuff, but they will all be under the ultimate authority of Jesus Christ on earth. Wow, I know, a lot of stuff. So I explained a lot of stuff there. Hopefully it didn't blow your mind too much. Hopefully this is going to be instrumental in helping us understand the rest of Revelation. But don't forget, we're going to be in Daniel one more week. Next week, chapter 9 and chapter 12. Read ahead, and we'll see you next week.